Hi guys, so today I'm going to be filming kind of a different video. I'm going to be talking about my testimony today and sharing it with you guys. This is something that for a long time I didn't really talk a whole lot about, something that I tried to avoid. I've only spoken about it, publicly a couple of times, like at church when I was asked to, but it's something that for many years I just avoided. But I've learned throughout the years that your story can really impact other people, and from hearing other people's stories, it's really impacted me and helped me to just freely share my story and not be so shying away from sharing it, and also it was just something I didn't really like to talk about, but I know that it's important to share your story, and I think that God calls us to share our stories. So my name's Rose, if you don't know. I was born on November 16th in 1995. My biological mother was an addict. So nobody really knew, what physical condition I'd be in after birth. It was just kind of up in the air. You don't really know in situations like that, and so they weren't really sure. But during a typical Indiana snowstorm, I made my appearance. And, as a baby, I did have a few issues with my lungs, but nothing too serious, and I was really pretty good. I was, a good weight, so everything was actually pretty good, and so that was great. But the day after my first birthday, my biological mother left, and she moved away, and I got to stay with who were then my grandparents, and I'll explain that more in a little while. But I got to stay with my grandparents, and they're awesome, and they're, my safe place. So I was really excited about that. I always just had a really deep connection with my grandparents. It was more like a mom and dad, even back then, more so than grandparents. I just was really, really close with them. But eventually, a few years later after she left, she came back, and she was granted visitation. She wasn't supposed to keep me overnight and things like that, and so that is where that's where it began. That's where the trauma and things that I don't enjoy talking about, but I know I need to come in. So there were a few incidents of kidnappings. Now, I know watching this, you're probably like, how could your biological mother kidnap you? That's not a thing, but it actually is. It's very possible. If she doesn't have the right to keep me, it's kidnapping. So she showed up and took me for a visit, and she didn't bring me back. And so, throughout these times, there are several different times where this has happened. And again, kidnappings can come in many different forms. It's not just, luring a child in off of the streets and throwing them in your car and taking them. That is real, and that's terrible, but that's not what I'm talking about today. It is very, very real that a parent can kidnap their child if they don't have the right, to keep their child overnight. So she didn't have the right to keep me, so it was a kidnapping. It happened a few different times. She was mean. She was an addict, and one thing that I've learned is that addiction, it does make you mean. It does make you hateful. And so she was an addict, and she would get drunk, and she would throw things at me. She would tell me, I told you that my grandparents, they were like parents for me, and I loved them so much. And I remember that she used to, we would be in a hotel room, and I would try to call them, and I would try to grab the phone, and she would tell me that they couldn't talk to me because they were dead. She would tell me that I was never going to see them again. She would tell me this stuff that as a child, I was a little child, and she would just tell me these awful things, and it was absolutely heartbreaking, and she didn't tell me in a compassionate way, or, she would just tell me, no, they're dead, you're not going to see them again. And I remember hearing those words and being like, are you serious? How did this happen? And as a child, I had no way of knowing, I couldn't just text them real quick. I couldn't contact them, and I felt so alone and so scared, and I thought that it was never going to get any better. So she would cuss at me and belittle me. I'm allergic to cigarette smoke, and she was a very heavy smoker, so I was sick all the time, with like severe like cold symptoms. I couldn't breathe very well when I was with her. It was just really bad. I remember there were so many times, during kidnappings where I would want to go to the bathroom and I wouldn't know where the bathroom was. I was a little kid. I needed help, and I would ask her if she could help me. and she would just scream at me and cuss at me, and she'd eventually pass out in the bed, and I would be alone, and I would pee my pants. You know, I a lot of the time I just had a big t-shirt on. I didn't have even pajamas sometimes, so I would just pee myself, and I didn't have anything to change into. So I would sit there like that, and I was a very, like, shy kid, so it was embarrassing for me, you know, for that. I knew that that wasn't what you were supposed to do, and I was just so embarrassed, and I felt seriously so alone during these times. I felt so alone. I can remember that feeling, and I say now that going through that made me stronger, because now, you know, I look back on that, and nothing that I go through now is as bad as that. It really isn't. It was such loneliness. And so my grandparents, they'd always taken me to church, you know, ever since, you know, they had me a good portion of my, you know, childhood, even before this, and they would always take me to church. It was a every week thing, you know. Sunday, whenever they'd open the doors of the church, we'd go to it. So I love church. I've always loved church. Church has been like my happy place. So I loved going to church, and I remember laying in bed, you know, one night when I was with her, and I had been so heartbroken that day, and I'd gone through so much, and I remember just laying there, and, you know, she was passed out next to me, and I just laid there. I remember praying, like, God, you know, I just want to go home. Like, can you just do something? You know, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be here with her. And I can remember doing that and just crying in myself to sleep and just saying, God, please, you know, just do something. I didn't really know what to say, or, you know, I was just a kid, but I was like, God, I just need you. You know, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm scared. I'm so scared. And it was really, really tough. You know, like I said, I went through all this, and still to this day, I remember the feeling of hopelessness, the feeling of being a child, you know, and not having any strength left, feeling like this was it. You know, that was all I was going to be able to go through, being cussed at, being belittled, feeling terrible about myself, sitting in pee for days, being hungry, and you know, trying to find some peanut butter and bread, you know, to make myself a sandwich, because that's the only thing I knew how to make. And I remember just being so alone and so scared and so broken, and hearing all this terrible stuff about the people that I loved and about myself. It truly, as a small child, had made me lose hope. And one of the times that she took me, I remember a policeman, he came to the door, and he knocked on the door, and he said police. I believe at this time, I think we were in Georgia. He said with the police department that he was with, and he was banging on the door. And I remember she said, shh, don't say anything. And I was like, okay. And I'm just sitting there, and I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be screamed at, and I didn't want to have things thrown at me. She had thrown beer bottles at my head. I mean, I was like dodging them. I didn't want to do that again. So I remember sitting there, and I remember thinking, please come in. You know, please just figure out a way to come in. I want him to find me. Like, I just want him to find me. And most kids, you know, you hear this officer screaming and banging on the door, you'd be scared. But I knew that I'd been taught that policemen, they were there to help you. And so I knew he wants to help me. He's coming in here, and he's going to help me. And so he was just banging on the door, and eventually he ends up just busting through the door. He comes in, and, you know, he has his hand on his gun, and he tells me, you know, it's going to be okay. And I remember exactly what he looked like. Still to this day, I was so little, and I can literally sit here and describe him to you. I'm not even kidding. If I saw him today, I would recognize him. Like, I know what the man looks like so well. And I remember he came over to me, and he picked me up. And I can remember being so embarrassed because I had been sitting in pee for days, and I was just a little kid. I didn't understand at the time that he understood that, you know, that he wasn't going to be like, what is wrong with this kid? But I just felt like he was. And like I said, I was really shy, especially around men. For some reason, I was like really scared of men. So I was really shy, but he picked me up, and he was just like, it's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. You know, I've got you. It's okay. You know, so it ended up being that I believe it was that time I was taken to a foster home. And just until my then grandparents were able to come and get me. But anyways, at the foster home, they were really nice, and I remember being hungry, and the lady there, she offered, I asked her if I could have some of the popcorn that she was making, which was totally not like me. I didn't ask for things, but I was hungry. I was so hungry. And I just said, excuse me, can I have a little bit of that popcorn? I remember saying that. And she said, yeah, you can have it all. Just here's the popcorn. Just take it. And she gave me this whole bowl of popcorn, and I still think about that every time I eat popcorn. And I just think that people in the foster care system, and of course there's bad ones and there's good ones, but I think that it's such a commitment, and it's so awesome. There were so many kids there. I remember there was like these little boys, and they looked exactly alike. And I think that they were like, triplets or something. I didn't know anything about that at the time. I just remember thinking, man, those kids look exactly alike. Like, what is going on there? But I can remember things about that. And so anyway, I believe that was that time. And I went to that foster home. My grandparents showed up, the next day, or maybe even that night, later in the night. And they picked me up. And then I remember there was a point that a lady was taking care of me when I was staying with my biological mother. And I called my grandpa. I called him Granddad. And when my biological mother came back for me, the lady said, I don't know who Granddad is, but you need to take her to him because she's not going to live if you don't. Because I would not eat. I'm very stubborn, and I think I knew that if I didn't eat, somebody would do something. If I just did that, if I just stood my ground and was like, I'm not taking that, I'm not eating that, I don't want that, I think I knew that somebody would come for me and somebody would notice something. So I wouldn't eat anything for them. And a lot of it, too, I think, was that my body was shutting down. I had given up hope. I was so broken. And I had been told such terrible things as a child. I'd had things thrown at me. I still dream about it. I still, to this day, I have nightmares about the things that I went through during this time. And I hate addiction so much. And I'm such an advocate for getting help for that reason, because I've been there. And it breaks my heart to see other kids that I know are living with a parent that struggles with that, because I've been there. And I've been through the emotional devastation of feeling hopeless and feeling as a child like there is nothing left. It's over, there's no hope. So anyway, my grandparents, they came to get me, the one time, and I want to go back to that. They came to get me from the foster home. I came in those nasty pajamas that I had, and they'd put a big shirt on me. There was an older girl that lived there. She was probably younger than I am now. I think she was probably like, a teenager. But I just thought she was way older, and she gave me one of her t-shirts. But anyway, my grandparents, had come to get me. I remember they told me that one of the times they came to pick me up from one of these few times that this happened. I remember they told me, and I remember it happening, that my grandpa at the time, that he had grabbed me and he'd hugged me, because it was just such a scary thing. They didn't know where I was. I was just broken, and they said that when you looked in my eyes, and of course I wasn't looking in my own eyes, but when you looked in my eyes, you could just see that there was nothing left. They said that you could just see it, like I didn't smile. I wasn't happy. I was just dying. And it sounds dramatic, but your body really does start to just give up when you feel like there's no hope. So I had just given up, and I just collapsed in his arms and I started crying. And it was just so hard to go through that and to not understand that there's hope. So later on, my grandparents, they adopted me, and they became, my mom and dad, which in my mind they already were. I say that all the time. In my mind, that's what they were. That's why I say my then grandparents, or I say that very loosely because they were parents to me. A parent is somebody who loves you, who doesn't leave you, who doesn't abuse you, who doesn't throw things at you, who doesn't hurt you, who doesn't threaten you, who doesn't tell you bad things about yourself. A parent is somebody who uplifts you, who encourages you, who loves you, who takes care of you, who helps you when you need help. That's what a parent is, and that's what they've always been to me. And you might wonder how this continued on for so long, how the abuse, the emotional, verbal abuse, how it continued on for so long. Why did it happen so many times? And that's what I wonder that too. I think that the system is very broken, and they tend to swing toward, the kid needs to always be with the biological mother. And while that is in your mind, that's great, and that's wonderful, and that's great. But it's not always the case, unfortunately. Unfortunately, some parents are not fit to be parents. And so I think that they sometimes swing more towards we need to try our hardest to make sure that this biological mother gets help. And so she ended up, she was supposed to go do counseling with me, and potentially she could have gotten me back if she did this counseling. And this was before the adoption, of course, but she didn't do the counseling. She just moved away again. So, she didn't put in the effort. So I was eventually adopted. I had to meet with her and have her sign papers to sign me over for the adoption. I was older at this point. When I got adopted, I was like 11, 12, that age. And I had to meet with her. I had to ask her because she had said no. She'd said that she wasn't signing the papers. And I've never known who my biological father is, but there was a guy on my birth certificate that he had to sign the papers as well. And he wouldn't do it until she did it, and it was this big mess. So I had to meet with her, and she tried to intimidate me. She tried to scare me out of it. And I remember just looking at her, and I remember telling her, "You're not my mom. I don't hate you. I forgive you, but you're not my mom. And I need you to sign the papers because I want to be able to call, my mom. I want to really, and I already did, but I want to really legally be able to say, that's my mom, and I want to have their last name, and I want this, just give this to me." And she had told me no and no and no, and then she left that day as she walked outside, and my dad followed her, and she signed the paper. And I don't talk to her a whole lot. I pray for her. I hope that she's doing okay. I don't like to share this story because I don't want people to think that I hate her. I don't want people to think that I'm bashing her or that I'm against her. I hope that she's okay. I hope that she's better. I hope that if she's not, that one day that she is. I hope that she finds God in the way that I have, and I hope that she finds freedom. I really do. But I share this story because I know that there's other kids that have gone through it. The struggles that I went through in that experience are lasting even today. And God is working on me, and God is healing me, and He's brought me so far. But I still struggle with anxiety, especially as a child. I had night terror almost every night. I couldn't sleep. My dad would have to sit up with me because I was terrified to sleep. I thought that she was going to come in and she was going to take me. I thought as a child that my mom, the one who had adopted me, I thought that she was wearing a mask at one point. I thought that she was really the other person, my biological mother. My mind was so messed up from it. I had a speech impediment. I stuttered really badly, and a therapist had told me it was because of childhood trauma, that a lot of children that go through trauma, that they can't speak properly for a while. And thankfully I was healed from that, and I'm okay now, but I still struggle with anxiety. I don't like to be alone. I don't like to sleep alone. I don't like to be by myself. I don't like to go places alone. I don't like to do anything alone because I'm scared of so many things because it caused this trauma. And I have this stress and this anxiety, and I still deal with that. And it's not fair. And it's not okay to treat children like that. It's not okay. It's not okay to abuse children verbally, emotionally, however it is. It's not okay. And what she did is not okay. And no matter what anybody says, no matter what anybody tries to tell me, I know what I know what I remember, and I know how I feel, and I know that it isn't okay. I was terrified of dogs because of things that I had gone through with a dog with her. I was just scared of everything, and it caused so much trauma. And, but I'm getting better, and God has freed me. God has truly freed me from so much. I could never fully put into words everything that I went through, everything that I felt, all the fear. I struggle with insecurity now. I struggle with low self-esteem, and I always have. And I know that that's why. I know that it's because of things that were said to me. I know that it's because of being belittled as just a little child when in those very essential years where you're supposed to be built up. I know that it was because I was torn down. And God is working on my heart. So how do I deal with it? Why do I have hope? Why am I different now? Why have I changed? Why am I being freed from this anxiety and this fear, and who is working on me? And His name is Jesus. And I can tell you one thing that is for sure. I don't understand a lot of things about the situation. But I can tell you one thing, that God was there. That He was right beside me, that when I was laying in bed that night and I was crying and I was praying, that He heard me. I know He did. And the reason that I know He did is not just because I trust it, but because I know that He sent the officer. The officer that made me smile and that made me feel safe again when I hadn't in so many days. I know that He sent the foster mom that gave me popcorn. I know that He kept me alive when even other people said she's not going to make it. I know that He's the one that kept me alive, and I know that He was there. I know that He gave me my parents. I know that, if it wasn't for them, I would have never gotten out of that situation. That they rescued me from that situation. I know that He sent them to do that. I know that that was his plan for my life. I know that he took my mess, the mess that I went through as a child, and he's turned it into my message. And he's turned it into something that hopefully I can use to give other people hope. I believe that he rescued me, and when God rescues you, when you're rescued, it's your turn to hand the life raft to somebody else. And so that's why I share my story. It's not because I want anybody to feel sorry for me or because I want to bash anybody, but it's because I know that God was with me. I know that he heard my cry for help, and I know that he sent people, and he sent his own presence. I know that in that bed that night, that even though I felt hopeless, I know there was something inside me telling me there is hope. I know that there was peace inside me that was like, you know what? I'm going to ask God for this because I trusted that he could do it, and he did it. And I know that he did it, and he brought me out of those situations. And there were even more. I didn't even share every story that I have in this. There was more. There was so many times, when I felt hopeless, but I still had this hope inside my heart. This hope that was an anchor for me, that kept me anchored. And I knew, I didn't know much about God yet as a young child, but I knew that he heard me. And he proved himself time and time again. He gave me my loving parents, and I got involved with a youth group. And I was surrounded by people who constantly spoke life into me. Even though, I had negative things spoken into my life as a child, I was surrounded by people who spoke good things. I received my call to ministry, and I became a full-time worship leader. I lead worship, and I also am able to share my story and share hope with people and share what God has done in my life. And he's really healed me. He's really freed me. He's really set me free from all of that. And now today I'm married to an amazing man. I work my dream job, and I'm not kidding. I have the man that I've always wanted. I have the job that I always wanted. I have an incredible family that supports me, that loves me. Of course I have scars. Of course I have scars from the past, but I really think that just allows me to be able to tell my story. It allows me to remember where God has brought me from, that he picked me up from the lowest of lows, and he surrounded me with people who love me, and he showed his love to me in an amazing way, and God truly rescued me. He truly took me from that situation, and he rescued me. And I want other little girls and little boys, or maybe now you're not little anymore, and maybe now you're like me, and you allow yourself to be a victim, and you allow yourself to say, I do this, I do drugs because my parent was an addict, and that's what I learned. Or you say, you know what, I'm mean and I'm hateful because that's what was shown to me. And you allow yourself to become that victim when Jesus has called us to be victorious. Jesus says he's won the victory, that he's already won it for us. So he's called us to walk in victory. And so that is my message. That's what I want to share, that you do not have to be a victim, that you can be a victor, that you can be victorious in the name of Jesus, that you do not have to be a victim of your past, but you can have hope. There is hope for you. So Jesus saved me. He rescued me. He proved himself to me time and time again. I know that he's trustworthy now because as a little girl, I laid in a bed and I cried out to him, and he sent help, and he surrounded me with his presence. And I know that he allowed me to survive that situation because I know that without him, I wouldn't have. And I can tell you that today, I would not have. I would have given up. But I knew that I had this hope in my heart that I'd been taught just from going to church. I knew that I had that hope that I could hold on to. And I truly believe that calling out to him, and that gave me hope. And I knew that he was there, and I could feel his presence surrounding me. So if you're broken, if you're lost, if you feel hopeless, if you've been abused, if you've been through, maybe it's sexual abuse, maybe it's mental abuse, physical abuse, whatever it might be, it's all abuse. It's all, equally abuse. And so no matter how you're dealing with it today, maybe you have turned to addiction yourself. Maybe you have turned to, going through different men, different women, trying to find that hope. I can tell you today that there is hope. His name is Jesus, and he hears your cry. He is faithful. And as my mom always says, this too shall pass. It's going to pass. You're not going to be there forever. And he wants to free you. So one of the main verses that's been my life verse my whole life, and I know that this is why he rescued me. And I say this to myself whenever I feel insecure, whenever I go back to those moments of heartache and of brokenness, and go back to those moments of fear and panic. I remember Jeremiah 29:11, and it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. He has a future for you. You do not have to be bound to your past. He has something incredible for your life. He is coming to rescue you. You just have to open up to him. And I love Psalm 18:6, and it says, "In my distress I called to the Lord. I cried to my God for help. From his temple he heard my voice. My cry came before him into his ears." And he hears your cry. He hears your cry for help. He wants to rescue you. He is there for you. Cry out to him, and he's there for you, and he has a hope for your future. So, and this is kind of like another verse I want to say really quickly. It's Lamentations 3:58, and it's, "You came to my rescue, Lord, and saved my life." And it's so simple, but yet it's my story. That is my story. That I was lost, I was broken, I thought that there was no hope, and God came to my rescue. He had a plan and a purpose for my life, and that is my story. That I'm rescued by God, that I'm a child of God, that I'm no longer, I don't have to be bound to what she may have said about me or what anybody else says about me. I'm not just another statistic of being a child of an addict, but I'm a child of God. I'm not a statistic, and I don't have to live as a victim. So if you're watching this and you're struggling with addiction, if you're watching this and you're struggling with anything like that, get help. There is help. There is hope. If you're a child who has been through this, if you're an adult who has been through this, if you've been through any kind of abuse, reach out to somebody. Get involved in a Bible-based church that is going to speak life into you. God has a plan for your life. Don't ever forget that. And sure, you may have the scars. You may deal with anxiety and fear and things later on in life. But he is there for you, and he always has his arms wrapped around me when I deal with things like that. And he is working on me, and I'm still a work in progress. So thank you guys for listening to my story. Thank you guys for listening to my testimony. It's hard to talk about. It's scary, and it was rough. And, I may not have even gone as detailed as maybe I wanted to, but, thank you for listening. And I hope that you guys are having a good day. Remember that there's hope in Jesus, and God bless you. I'll talk to you guys soon. You're